Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the Malt Travail podcast, episode 8. We are recording this on the 11th of March, Thursday night, so hopefully it will be out on the airwaves by Friday the 12th, if possible. Evening, gents. We thought we'd just start for those on the YouTube, on the video channel. We thought somebody mentioned this week it'd be nice to see our faces rather than little video clips that you get. So we're going to start off with our lovely faces, and then we'll kind of crack on. So how are we, gents?
Fine, thank you.
Good. So, well, I've already made my confession that unfortunately this week I'm going to be drinking, well, I think it's quite a nice idea. I'm going to bring some AF. So I've got a Brewdog Punk AF, alcohol-free, and I've also got, quite interesting this, a Rat House Hefeweizen, but an alcohol-free one as well. And if I was saying to Nick was coming to Christmas with down to Staffordshire with my mum and dad, and of course we'd planned, in fact I'd actually bought, and I got a mini keg of Titanic plum porter, which was very good, and so that was the plan. And then obviously last minute we got told, fortunately you can't come for a couple of days, you can't come for a day. So Nick, as designated driver, offered to drive mum and dad down so we'd have Christmas together, but of course then he couldn't drink. So I tried to quickly order through, I think, Honest Brew or somebody, a small selection of alcohol-free, and unfortunately they arrived on about Boxing Day, so Nick didn't quite get them. I had to nip out. I think Nick could get you some Ghost Ship, those low alcohol Ghost Ships, I think, in the end, wasn't it? And a couple of Brew Dogs.
I think I took some down as well, didn't I?
Yeah.
Brought me home. Bring me home.
So the reason why I'm doing that is I got a phone call this afternoon from my GP saying, do I want this vaccine thing tomorrow? So they said that. Do you want this vaccine? I said, what do you mean? You want the COVID one? Yeah. I said, I think probably I do, yeah. When can I have it? She goes, tomorrow. Can you come tomorrow? So I'm having my vaccine done tomorrow. So just play things safe. I'm just going to keep off the ale tonight. I've also got a blood test first in the morning as well for my pre-diabetes check. So I'm going to keep it safe, hopefully. Nick, you're no doubt having a beer tonight.
Yeah, gone back to Yorkshire. So first one is Fine Fettle, our friends over at Great Newsom on the Holderness Plain. And then the next one, we're going across to Leeds. I think we covered Leeds last week. So I've got some Kirkstall Brewery, Three Swords. Now you often see that on electric pump in the pubs. I don't see that too much on hand pump. It sometimes can be a little bit cloudy as well, but I'm looking forward to that one. That's a 4.5%. So that's me 2 Yorkshire based tonight.
And that's a nice link, because that's one of the breweries we mentioned last week, was it, when we did our Leeds trip? Kirkstall.
Yeah.
I think they're quite close to the Abbey, aren't they? Down on that kind of west side of Leeds. And again,
there's a train stop there now as well.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff.
So
Bruce is still not drinking. He's still recovering.
I've been in the water. I tried a bottle of beer on Saturday night, but it was like a huge explosion of quite sour hops. I've tried a whiskey, which tasted bizarrely, as if I leave a glass of whiskey overnight and they have it the following morning, it tastes distinctly stale. Whiskey tastes like that, and wine just tastes like rotting fruit. So sadly, no further along.
Looks like you've moved house as well, Bruce. It looks like you're in a student squat.
I am in Ben's bedroom, which is it's like a squat anyway, but unfortunately it's waiting to be we're waiting for the plaster to come to decorate. So yeah, it's like quite solid in this really. Crack then, yeah.
And Nick's coming live again from the cellar bar up in Norton.
Yes. Yeah. It's been windy today. It's probably the safest place in North Yorkshire at the moment, down below the ground level. So yeah.
I rode by the Minster this morning on my bike, and as I turned from by the Dean Court Hotel, by the side of the Minster there, it literally knocked me sideways off my bike. I mean, I'm not the lightest person in the world. It was insane the way it funnels the wind down there.
Now, Nick, we're still waiting for the Grand Tour, Nick. You have promised us a Grand Tour around the cellar. I think you excused last time it was a bit cold or something, so we'll have to.
It's still the technical. I'll give you a bit of a tour next week, because as I say, I've still got 3 extension leads, power lead, and a headphone socket plugged in. So I didn't want to start moving stuff around.
We're going to be talking about logos and labels, and I can clearly see the background there. We've got a bit of Adnams, we've got a bit of Guinness, we've got the Tetley's Huntsmen, we've got is that not a Roses? Is that a...
No, that's Russells and Wranghams.
Russells and Wranghams.
Malton.
And then quite a few beer. Are there Guinness glasses up there as well, or a combination?
Very selection, yeah.
Good stuff. So yeah, if you are listening on the podcast, probably this week, you know that we do this as a kind of dual thing. We're doing it through Zoom, so we do a video and we have kind of a presentation running with pictures and things. And this week probably is a good one if you've not had a chance yet to look for the YouTube channel, Malt Travail, and see the video bit as well, because we are going to be talking a little bit about it. We just thought we'd do something different this week. And Nick give me a rest, so Nick's kind of put most of this together. We've talked about kind of branding and labels and logos and things, so we can do that this week. So that is the plan. So I'm going to go and share the screen now so that we can hopefully crack on with this. So I think it's that one. Yep, and we'll just do our normal kind of roundup of the various bits and pieces that we've been kind of doing this week. Just pick up from last week, just very quickly, just some clarifications. Actually, we covered most of them, I think, in the actual podcast, but we were a bit stuck. I mentioned that Leeds is the 4th largest student population in the UK, and we got a bit stuck remembering all the universities. So it is the University of Leeds, Leeds Beckett, which used to be Leeds Metropolitan University, Leeds Trinity, which is Catholic University, and Leeds Art University, which I think I mentioned, and I did mention, I thought it would be. Leeds colleges are all one big kind of group now, and they have a university centre as well. So those are the 5 unis. Bruce kind of put me on the spot, asking me when Marks and Spencer's first opened in the Kirkgate Market, and it was we were fairly close, 1884. The pub we did get to at the end, the one that's by the Minster. So if you're going from kind of the Duck and Drake towards the Adelphi, about halfway is the Palace, and we mentioned that's right next to the Leeds Minster. Had a quick look at there today. It used to be a Nicholson's pub, which are at Mitchell and Butler's off Arm, whatever they call themselves. It's still a Mitchell and Butcher's. It was called Oak Tree Pubs, which I've not heard about before. But anyway, maybe that's a new arm that they've got. It seems to have got a specialised in craft beer now, though. Rather, they didn't mention any cask running, and they wouldn't at the moment. But the website was more banging on about craft beer. So again, and I think, Nick, you mentioned maybe last time you were in there was a probably distinct like a cask, and you guys had Guinness or something.
I remember we ended up buying Guinness, and maybe that was the reason that there wasn't any real ale on this. Well, all traditional real ale.
Just interesting again. I think I mentioned last week the Melbourne Brew, which I don't know a lot about actually. I mentioned that the Templar in Leeds, which is on one of the main kind of city centre streets, has got very old Melbourne ales outside the front of it. And I did a bit of digging. Melbourne Brewery was based in Leeds. It was actually originally the Leeds and Wakefield Brewery, which was established in 1889. It was then converted or became the Melbourne Brewery in the 1950s. Was bought out by Tetley's in the 1960s and then closed down. There are a couple of other breweries called Melbourne that are other bits in the country, but I've always that Melbourne Brewery sign outside Temple's always stuck out a little bit there. So that was that one.
Going back to the Russell's trade that's behind me, it was Melbourne Breweries that bought out Russell's in 1958, and then they were in turn, like as you say, bought out by somebody else, which ended the demise of Russell's and also brewing in Malton. So
again, we're back onto one of our themes, aren't we? We've talked a lot about big breweries, in the last 10 years buying breweries out, but actually it's been going on pretty much for the last century and a half. I suppose that's just the way that commerce works.
1950s, 1960s, definitely.
And then Bruce's little segment last week on the slightly more challenging pubs of Leeds. Bruce mentioned one of the Sam's pubs, the Duncan. And you got a bit mixed up thinking it was named after some Leeds footballer. Again, it's not. It's named after the Admiral Duncan, who apparently was the Viscount of Camberdown, who was a very famous admiral in the Napoleonic era. So
it's an urban myth. It's an urban myth. Lots of people told me that, but they probably never dared go in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably why. Okay. Well, I think Beery highlights we're getting lower and lower on these, aren't we? I'm hoping that on Saturday I'm going to rekindle my Hop Fuzz brewery tasting. Although I would say I've not heard a lot from the brewery yet this week. I had a quick look on Facebook today. That we remember last time I was doing that, they had a power cut on the afternoon of the tasting. So the beers are still in the fridge, but I need to find where the hops and malt have gone up. My lad's not eating them. I need to find those. But that's about it for me, really. Not been doing a bit much drinking this week. I don't know. I felt a bit flat this week. It feels although we kind of talked last week about pubs reopening, and I've been seeing lots of twitters of pub gardens being banged together and people building outdoor shelters and things. It's just still feels quite a way off, doesn't it?
I was speaking to somebody today who works for Molson Coors, and they said it's the lull before the storm. They're being contacted by so many landlords who are looking to actually put bars outside.
Yeah.
And when I questioned that, I said, well, it's the difference between having a bar physically outside and allowing your beer garden to be used. And I suppose it comes down to licensing. But yeah, it seems that a lot of landlords, not just moving furniture outside, but actually putting a bar.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, I still don't know that people can actually walk up to the bar and get served at the bar. I still think it's going to be a table service. I suppose it just makes it a bit quicker, doesn't it, really? So, yeah, that was the feedback from that. He himself is saying that still, it's probably, as we mentioned a couple of weeks back, that the industry is looking at, at least half the pubs ain't planning to open. I was thinking myself today, earlier on, in fact, in Moulton, most of the pubs should be able to open because with it being a market town, they all have either garden, back areas, yards, or car parks. But once again, I think it's going to be in the bigger towns and cities where a lot of the pubs have very, very little outdoor space, unless the council, once again, as we spoke about last week, allow people to put chairs and tables out on pavements and even into the road. I can see a lot of town and city pubs not bothering opening, even when they're theoretically allowed to on the 12th of April.
And again, I think we mentioned last week, I think it's now gone back to the kind of the smoking rules, isn't it? That's classed as outdoor rather than you have to have a garden. So if you've got a smoking area, for example, that could be a drinking area. And I understand that the food bit's completely gone. I think you don't have to have a bloody meal to be able to order a pint now, or a Scotch egg or whatever it was. So, but again, I know last week, Nick, you mentioned, what this concern about whether people will be coming back. And I just noticed this week there's been a lot of things about, obviously, the Chancellor's budget and a lot of things saying, Sunak and his help out to eat out. Was that one of the real causes behind that second wave that we had in the autumn, when people did rush out and go and enjoy themselves? And so again, I guess there is still people who will be a little bit wary out there as well about where we're going.
Yeah. Time round though, won't we? There'll be that degree of confidence about that. And they're saying that everybody over 40 is going to be vaccinated by the end of April, so it should put a bit of confidence.
Well, I was just thinking that again, it's a vaccine thing. Does that mean that it's back to the Silver Surfers going out and getting wasted, and all the younger people saying it's a bit dodgy still? I'm going to stay in.
10 o'clock in the morning in Wetherspoons, yeah. Pints of Stella again. Okay,
a bit again, our normal beer news. Again, we're going to try and keep this to fairly limited if we can. Bruce, I know I've been looking at to Wetherspoons again, linked to opening really. They're going to open some of their pubs, aren't they?
Yeah, bizarre, but they're closing at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock because it seems very strange, that doesn't it? Because one of the general things that everybody agreed on last time was that turfing everybody out at 10 o'clock, put everybody on the street and on the buses, and probably did it help in terms of lowering infections. And really, they said they're closing at 10, even on Friday, Saturday, 9, Sunday to Thursday. So I thought that was strange, really, both commercially, and it sort of flies in the face of what people generally agreed was a bad idea last time out. It's hard to see the rationale behind that, really, isn't it?
Well, think about it though, Bruce. If everybody's outside, they're not in the pubs. Everybody's outside. It's going to be noise nuisance and residents. And the less you leave it on a night, the less excuse you've got. So I'm thinking it's probably more to do with that. Yeah, make sure that everybody's finished drinking by 10 o'clock. Then the next door neighbours aren't going to complain about the row that's going on.
Possibly. And it's also, again, one of my former lives, it's also quite hard to maintain order, shall we say, in a pub garden. It's much easier if you're controlling a door, for example, and controlling people in a pub when they've had a few beers, than it is trying to control people climbing up tables, jumping over fences, and all the other stuff that goes on as well. And I remember all those pictures, all those football fans in the summer. Outside you tend to throw beer quite a lot, don't you? Whereas you very rarely see anybody throw a beer in a pub. But outside, everything seems to be a thing. So, and again, I've just put there some of the Yorkshire pubs which are opening, which again, we've been to most of those, and we've mentioned quite a few of those. We mentioned the Bellflower in Selby a couple of weeks ago. You guys have mentioned the Winter Gardens in Harrogate, which is a fantastic building, isn't it? Big one there. We mentioned the Devonshire in Skipton the other week when we were there. We've mentioned I think we mentioned the Angel in Whitby as well. And they're the Ralph Fitzrandall in Richie Sunak's hometown of Richmond. That's another cinema. I've actually been in there. It's quite a nice, it's off the kind of main square, which is quite nice as well. And then just an interesting one for me, there's been loads of these collabs at the moment where breweries are getting together. And we had a quick think about this before we kind of came on air, that interestingly, Thornbridge, who again, I think one of our, certainly for me and Nick, one of our top breweries, and we were lucky to visit the brewery there. Was it last year? Probably a year ago, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a year last. 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
We didn't do anything last year.
True. And we had a really good day there, didn't we? And they just recently moved the tap, I think, because they moved the brewery across the road. And we had quite a good afternoon in there. And they've done a very interesting collab with Adnams, which is again another brewery and beer that we've talked about quite a bit. And Nick, you were down that, I think your last probably holiday was down there, wasn't it? So
Yeah,
Adnams.
didn't get into the brewery, but certainly went to, they've got a very impressive brewery shop. And Southwall, it's a nice little seaside town. So yeah, that was the one and only holiday that I managed last year after lockdown, after what, the first lockdown, sort of July time, I think it was.
So
And that's why I couldn't get in the brewery, because the brewery was busy, and unfortunately what they call their brewery tap was very, very busy as well.
Yeah. So they've done a collab together, and they've called it Nevermore, which is an Indian porter, which is a mix of Adnams Ghost Ship and Thornbridge Well Raven. So there's a picture there by some very nice Suffolk seaside. It looks quite a dark one, doesn't it? For
I bet that's nice. I bet that's
India
delicious.
porter. Yeah, I mean, it says that the Ghost Ship's 4.5 and Well Raven's 6.6, and it doesn't. I haven't put there what the ABV is, but I had a quick look on Thornbridge. They're not selling it in their beer shop yet. It may be Thornbridge do a subscription box every month, and I think they tend to put these kind of beers in that subscription box, which I've thought about, but it's 40 quid a month, and I don't know, it just feels a bit expensive to me for that. I do like Thornbridge beers, and they do quite a range.
Getting on 500 quid a year, that then, isn't it?
I know, and you know, if you play your cards right, I've got a load of offers come through this week. You know, you get 10% off Beer Hawk or Honest Brew or whatever, and every now and then they'll do a free delivery. So I can normally get some beers with 29 quid. Similar on the beer. So and then we just mentioned, I think it was it Tuesday, that was International Women's Day. And again, obviously I work in a college and we celebrated that, but also it was really interesting that a lot of podcasts on that day, a lot of social media was about some fantastic women in beer and brewing at the moment. It's amazing how many there are now. It feels like it's a real a real surgence of women getting involved, not just talking about beer, but being involved hands-on, and which is great. And I think the next thing, of course, is ethnic minority, and that's another, I think there's a camera, I accept that it's still a very kind of white, again, middle class, kind of beery kind of view, isn't it? So that way I quite enjoyed listening to quite a few of those podcasts. And then just at the end, just one for me, really. I just picked this up and I talked to Nick. I mean, again, we've had quite a few enjoyable sessions up in the lakes, and we've mentioned Hawkshead. And I think it was one of our, I think we mentioned it as one of our kind of, that was right, when we did Allwell, we mentioned food, pub food. And I think we mentioned that the Hawkshead tap up in Staveley do a really nice English, what do you call it, an English
tapas.
Yeah. And I just got a tweet came through, I think it was somebody that retweeted it, about the Lakes Brewing Company, and they're quite new, so I had a quick look, and looking through the thread I kind of picked up that maybe something here that we can have a quick look at. So a bit more digging. Hawkshead now is owned by a company called Halewood International, which doesn't sound very brewy, but they are a fairly long-standing distiller, kind of wine merchant kind of group. They're the people behind, they own now Whitley Neal's, the huge gin brand. They also have the Dead Man Fingers rum. They do the Pogues whiskey, which you can often see in supermarkets. And they now have both Hawkshead and also Sadler's. Sadler's were quite a very famous 1800s brewery in the Black Country in Oldfield. They brew the Peaky Blinders beers, again, which you see quite a lot in supermarket. Although I did notice, actually, I noticed on Thornbridge, Thornbridge claim that they do the official, they call it Shelby, don't they? And on their labeling, it says that they are the official Peaky Blinders beer called Shelby. So interesting how, again, I don't know whether Halewood are from Liverpool or just outside Liverpool, and obviously a lot of Peaky Blinders is filmed in Liverpool, a lot of it around the Baltic and around the brewery there. So whether there's something going on there. Anyway, cut long story short, at the start of lockdown, Halewood, who've had Hawkshead for about 2 years now, I think just over 2 years, suddenly made quite a lot of the key staff redundant. They came in and blamed COVID and said, there's not going to be a market for beer. And people like the head brewer and the assistant brewer, so around about 20 key staff were actually made redundant at the start of lockdown. Hawkshead are continuing; they still kept moving on, and the guys, I guess they cobbled together with their redundancy money, and fantastic in that they have re-emerged as themselves as the Lakes Brew Company. and they're just launching now. And some very nice photography of them up there. I think that's probably cat bells, I would imagine, they're back there. And they're based in Kendal now, and they're going to start brewing some Lake District beers. They are hoping to put up a pop-up tap outside the brewery. And again, Nick were mentioning, it's about the brewery, the new brewery is about 5-10 minutes from the railway station in Kendal as well. So a great place probably to visit. We've mentioned Kendal a couple of times, and I know you two guys have talked, you can just about get Kendal, can't you? One of those northern day ticket things.
Smart move. I mean, I think that was a thing with Staveley. They were fortunate that there is a little railway stop there, because I know when they used to have their beer festivals, I happened on one of those, and it was obvious because, you know, vast majority of people who were there at the beer festival come on the train, and it was a known route for people over in the west of the country to jump on the train and do that line. So Kendal obviously is nearer to the West Coast main line, so even more so, I would hope that when people are doing stuff like we do by train, it makes it even more accessible than Staveley even was. So smart move by those guys, and I will certainly go across there and supporting them when I can, as long as they don't change the recipes of the beers too much, because I say I've always enjoyed their beers, really have.
I mean, that's interesting. I don't know what happens there. I don't know. I mean, I know sometimes you can bring, you know, if you're, whether you've got that recipe copyright. Yeah. Who knows? So again, just a quick look at Halewood. You know, a bit more detail. I'm not saying anything about Halewood, but interesting that when they bought Sadler's Brewery, they actually took the brewing away and took all the brewing up to Hawkshead. So actually, most of the Peaky Blinder beer was actually brewed in Hawkshead, not in the West Midlands. And apparently they moved quite a lot of the kit from there over to Ireland, and that's where they make the Pogues whiskey. And it's funny because, Nick, you bought me some of that, I think, for Christmas a couple of years ago. I quite like an Irish whiskey. It's whiskey with an E, isn't it, Irish whiskey, rather than without the E. Yeah. And I thought we'd be trying to find out who brewed it and distilled it. And it's quite hard to find, wasn't it? Because Ireland's still quite unique in that there are actually that many distillers. There certainly weren't that many distilleries in Ireland. They all kind of do. I mean, they've got Bushmills and Jamesons, but they all do brand. Yeah, a bit like in Scotland, they all do lots of brand names, don't they? So that maybe one to just keep an eye on, really. And certainly, it'd be interested to go back to Hawkshead, the brewery tab. It's a lovely building. It's a nice place to have a beer, isn't it? It's a bit weird because it's kind of back of a little mini industrial estate. But
it's an industrial estate, but yeah.
So we'll see. So anyway, this week we're going to look at labels, logos, and reflections. So, Nicholas, what's the philosophy here? What's the idea?
Well, as you say, we're on our 8th podcast now. We've discussed various different routes, and for no other reason, we were sort of running out of places where we could recommend. But advertising, branding, marketing is ultra important to any industry, I would think, but certainly the beer and the drinking industry. Going back to, we talked about when a lot of brewers had been started sort of early 1800s. Even then, you know, to find themselves a marketplace, they had to promote themselves as competition increased. So I just thought that covering, I also am a collector of Brewerymania, or whatever you want to call it. So I like this stuff, you know, and obviously the products that are produced, the merchandise produced, it can be a diverse range of stuff, from ashtrays to, I mean, even you two guys, you started before I did, collecting the beer mats wherever you went. Thing is, now it's very difficult to find beer mats. You know, a lot of pub chains have got a policy where we don't have beer mats anymore because they're untidy. And yet the worst thing I ever find is you go and get a pint of beer, you put it on a polished table. If it's a cold beer, then all the condensation runs down the glass. If it's being served at a proper measure, it runs over the top of your pint anyway. And you're constantly getting beer dripping into your lap. So in fact, I've got in the habit now of actually carrying beer mats around myself in my pockets, and rest of the family find it quite amusing. But I always have myself a beer mat. If there's no beer mat available, I'll turn around and say, right, I'll use my own. And sometimes when you get people coming to clear your tables, they spot a beer mat of a brand of beer that they don't sell, and they look a bit peculiar at you. So sometimes I have to explain myself, and sometimes I don't. So yeah, in its simplest form, it's collecting beer mats.
Episode of Mr. Bean.
What?
Hey, hang on a minute. Hang on. Says the man who used to collect toilet soaps. And I remember being stopped, I think, on the way back from bloody Amsterdam. And he had a bloody bag full of toilet soaps. And the customers go, what are these? Oh, they're toilet soaps. I collect them.
Bricks of cocaine, yeah. No, there's nothing worse, Bruce, than you're having a drink and it's dripping on your lap and you stand up. It looks like you're semi-incontinent. So,
Very true, yeah.
so no, it's only forms of beer mats, and obviously you can look upon it as investment as well, Bruce. I mean, some of the beer mats now, you know, it's
Well,
a hobby
12
out there.
pence. And me and Bruce must admit, we actually once in our early days, we actually went all the way to Warrington to a beer mat festival or whatever it was, which was in some kind of hotel, whatever it was, Holiday Inn, a very strange, full of men with suitcases full of beer mats. It was strange.
An international pastime as well. I mean, if you go on some of these auctions, online auction sites, I won't mention any names, but once again, it seems massive in America. It's amazing how much British branded Brewerymania is available and being sold in America for ridiculous prices. So I thought it might be nice to have a bit of a reminisce as well. As we've mentioned before, we really started our drinking in the 80s. You two guys being a couple of years older than me, sort of the early to mid 80s, me sort of back end of the 80s. And I think really 80s was a time that, marketing and branding and advertising was very important to the breweries. But we moved from really them promoting the beer in the 40s and 50s to the new kid on the block, the lagers. So going through 60s and 70s, it was still beer, but I think the 80s really was more of a time of branding the lager. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not. So, and I would say, if you approached anybody in the street tomorrow morning and asked them to give you a beer slogan or a phrase, I would reckon that 9 times out of 10, they'll give you a lager one. So there are a lot of beer slogans and phrases out there.
Sorry, Nick, I was going to challenge you on that because obviously beer advertising has been pretty much limited now, hasn't it? So I think you're right. When we were younger, you got lots of adverts for fags and beer on the TV. I mean, you don't actually get. I'm trying to think now. Do we still get beer adverts on telly?
No, you're right.
We do.
Well, I don't think they're out, are they?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Who was like they advertise, don't they?
Oh, true. Yeah. There are some.
Can't advertise, don't they? But
I mean,
you're right, yeah.
John Smith's had all those kind of adverts with Peter Kay and people, didn't they? That were kind of massive John Smith adverts, were they? Now, I was just taking the link in it because there's a link in the back to pubs. Because again, I was trying to find out which podcast we're really interested in about the history of kind of brewing and pubs. And obviously, I think it was the Romans who first had this idea of putting something outside their kind of wine tavern to say this is a wine tavern.
Their tabernae.
Well,
they were the first one that really set up taverns and hostels because the Romans were used to traveling. They were building the roads. When people had to stop for something to eat and drink, they advertised, certainly like you say with the wine, that the wine was ready by putting a vine outside.
That's right.
Now, that wasn't conducive over in the UK because we don't grow many vines. So what they used to do was put a bush outside. And so the bush is quite a common pub name. And it all started from there.
And then
in terms of using the sign.
And then I understand then what the big difference was then with the industrial, I guess the agricultural revolution, first of all. So back in the 1400s, most people brewed beer. Everybody brewed beer in the house. Everybody brewed beer. You had something on the pot, like a porridge on the pot that became a beer. And that's how you kind of drank, it was something to do obviously with the water, maybe wasn't as fresh. So by brewing it, you kind of made it normal. When the agricultural revolution happened and less people were working on their own farm or on their own bit of land and were moving around, the alewives, which were those first people that were brewing, had access beer because now they weren't working as hard or they were traveling further afield, and they again would put something outside their house to say again their brew, similar thing, their brew is ready, because it's where the pub sign comes from. And then you start to develop that, because if your beer was better than the one down Mrs. Smith down the road, you might put something a bit more fancy outside, and people would look out that same thing really traveling through. So I guess that's
moving on from the Romans, the next then big tavern owners were the monasteries. It was the monks. And that's why a lot of pubs have a religious angle to their signs. And even, things like the bishop's finger, which was the finger marker pointers to on the Canterbury Tales on the pilgrimages. But then it was one of the kings as well. I'll look this up for next week. Possibly King John for the Crusades. In order to fund his armies, he had an official beer inspector that went round and checked the beers to do with taxes. And so he said that everybody who's selling beer has to have a sign to make his tax inspector easier to find the pubs. And because the majority of the population at that time were illiterate, the signs that they would put out, instead of putting beer on sale here, it would be a symbol that they would relate to, or a symbol. And once then you would get a lot of coat of arms, and it would be a symbol of the landowner in the area, because as we talked about, the mill owners in places like Bradford and Leeds, they like to show their wealth on their sleeves. And so if the landowner in a particular area can have his coat of arms or some reference to him in the pub sign, he would do that. So that's when you started to get diverse pub signs from, heraldry and things like that as well. So yeah, I mean, the history of pub signs and things like that, it's a podcast in its own right. And as you say, people have already done it, but yeah.
Right, let's crack on then. So shall I move on to the first slide?
Coming back to the connection between branding as well, obviously, everybody recognised the red triangle. In fact, I think this has been mentioned before. I know Bruce used to mention this in your historic pub tours, that the red triangle was the first UK registered trademark, and that was registered on New Year's Day in 1876. And there is a bit of a folklore tale that, in fact, it was an employee of Bass was first in the queue. He missed out on his New Year's Eve because he had to stand in the queue ready to register the red triangle as the first UK registered trademark. Bass also got the number 2 registered trademark in a diamond. Now, they'd actually been using the triangle since 1855 on their barrels of beer, because they had 3 breweries on the go. They had the old brewery, the middle brewery, and the new brewery, all down at Burton. Whichever brew went into a barrel, it was marked with a triangle, different colour triangle, either a red, white or blue triangle. But as far as a red triangle was concerned, that was incorporated into the beer label for all their bottled Bass pale ale by supposedly a clerk who was working in their office, a chap called George Curzon. And he came up with the idea to put the red triangle onto the beer bottle. And in fact, it has featured in a lot of literary. I think Joyce mentions it in Ulysses, sat in a pub and seen red triangle on, and a lot of the very, very well-known artists of the late 1800s, in fact, featured bottles of Bass within their some of their images. So Bass, in terms of branding, they were the first people to take branding on board and come up with a symbol that could be recognised. And obviously Bass were sending their beers all around the world as well. So the red triangle became synonymous with a good quality beer, and people wanted to associate themselves with that. There is still a thinking why it was a triangle in the first place, and there was revelations that the Bass family were not to do with mythology, but to do with Egypt and the pharaohs and all this sort of stuff, and power and the afterlife. But obviously it's going back a long time, and people can't really get to the bottom of that now. But that's why Bass is significant now. So that was the first registered trademark. But the next slide is probably the most iconic image that has ever been used in brewing. And that is...
The Guinness
Anybody,
harp.
any ideas?
The Guinness harp?
Not the harp. No,
Right.
thinking of a character or a creature.
The Guinness toucan.
The toucan, that's right.
Right.
So you want to click it on a slide.
Well,
Mike,
hang on, because
I'm
I'm going to challenge you here, because I've also read, and this may be to do with the trademarking, that the Guinness harp is also often referred to as the oldest beer logo in the world. And that was, again, guess what? Guess when that was registered? 1876, exactly the same year as the Bass Triangle. But whether that was done in Dublin,
Ireland,
not in London, or
yeah.
And I think at the start, Guinness probably wouldn't have been the global beer that Bass was, even in the 1800s, as you said, the IPAs you mentioned before, haven't we? So yeah, the Guinness harp.
The impression that the Bass Triangle came about because all the soldiers that were stationed in the far-flung corners of the empire were so despondent. The government were paying brewers large amounts of money to ship the beer out there to keep spirits up. And Bass devised a triangle because most of these guys couldn't read, right, unfortunately. So they knew the Indian Pale Ale was the one with the Bass red triangle on it to distinguish it from the competitors. So that was
I suppose that goes back to your pub signs, Bruce. Like we say, people who couldn't read or write, it was a symbol that could be easily identified. But the reason why they came up with the triangle in the first place, because they developed from the symbol, the triangle that was already on the barrels in the brewery. So that was a symbol in terms of the slogans and the logos that they used. We've got a couple there on screen. A little bit of better and reach for greatness. So
As
they
we've
were synonymous.
I think the other thing was, of course, that we said almost from day one when Bass got so good, everybody tried to copy Bass to the point that, you know, the Burtonised the water, weren't they? You know, other breweries in other parts of the country and other parts of the world were trying to make their water, Burtonising it to taste like the water you get from Burton-on-Trent. So I think some of it was also to maintain that, you know, we are Bass. You're buying the real McCoy here, not somebody imitating it, which again is something we could talk about. So, Colin, let's talk about this toucan.
It's a bit mould, a bit sort of. I always felt it was a bit sort of wheaty somehow. It was a totally unique beer, wasn't it?
Well, I think that was to do with the water. I mean, it was always a slightly darker beer as well as I remember.
And they also call it the Burton Sniff. It all slightly sulfuric, a bit like rotten eggs, a little bit of rotten eggs. The Burton Sniff, the Burton Sniff, And I think Pedigree's probably still got that. If you get a decent pint of Pedigree, when you first smell it, you'll just get that slight little bit of sulfur, a little bit of kind of rotten egg smell initially, which is the gypsum salts. That's where it kind of comes from, So, Colin, let's get onto this toucan bird then. So
I reckon that the Guinness toucan is probably the most recognised iconic symbol around the world. And I think the guy who drew it, John Gilroy, he'd have a pound every time it was used, or every time somebody put it on the wall at home or any other sort of merchandise. He would have been a very, very, very rich man indeed. So, yeah, the toucan is attributed to John Gilroy, but in fact, it was a lady, appropriate seeing that it's International Ladies' Day or Week this week. It was a lady that came up with the idea of the toucan, and that was a lady called Dorothy L. Sawyers. She was well known as a fictional crime writer, as a poet, but she also worked as a copywriter for an advertisement agency called S.H. Benson's, and Gilroy was one of their artists. And she came up with the phrase or the slogan of the poem, "If he can say as you can, Guinness is good for you. How grand to be a toucan. Just think what toucan do." So she came up with the words first, and Gilroy then created the toucan. And I love Gilroy's work. It's very characteristic. Whether it be animals or whether it be human characters, they're always sort of a caricature. They always look happy, and they're always very distinctive style. So in fact, Gilroy carried on being very successful for sort of 40 or 50 years of his life. During the war, he was used by the Ministry of Information, and there are a couple of classic propaganda information posters out there that straight away you see them and you recognise Gilroy's hand in them. But anybody who was a fan of Gilroy, in fact, pub that you might want to visit is the Morit Hotel up at Greta Bridge, which is up in County Durham. It's on the road that connects over from Scotch Corner over to Carlisle there. Is that the A66? Yeah, anybody know?
It is the A66.
Anyway, a place called Greta Bridge. Greta Bridge has a connection with Charles Dickens. They reckon Charles Dickens went up there and stayed up there whilst he was looking and researching for Nicholas Nickleby, because of a lot of the Yorkshire boarding schools up there. So he stopped in the Morit Hotel. Fast forward to the turn of the century. John Gilroy was actually born in Whitley Bay, and he went to Durham University. His university scholarship was cut short by the war, the First World War. After the war, he then went to the College of Art and eventually became a draftsman. But I think with his local connection, he must have frequented the Morit Hotel, because it was after the war that the hotel actually made this claim themselves on their website that he owed them a debt. He had a bill to pay. So rather than paying them in cold hard cash, he offered to do some work for them. So if you go to the Morit Hotel now, in the back room, which they actually call the Dickens Bar now, there's almost a full floor-to-ceiling mural that wraps itself all the way around the bar of Dickensian scenes. But it's painted by Gilroy. And once again, you look at the characters, the round, jolly faces and the ruddy cheeks. And even if I didn't know this already, if I'd just gone into that bar as a stranger and looked, I would have said, that artist looks very reminiscent to me. That looks like Gilroy. But as I said, I'd already discovered this and got in there. But yeah, so if you're ever up in County Durham, Greta Bridge, the Morrit Hotel, it's worth having a look in there just for the artwork, and they do sell real ale in there as well. So the Guinness was the starting point, and then, as I mentioned, then John went on and created a whole menagerie of animals, and his zookeeper there that's just peeping out the ark door. This actual piece isn't done by John Gilroy, it's in the style of, but I have this on my wall and I quite like it because it's showing all the animals there, the Guinness there, the toucan, the seals obviously as well, and the giraffes. And I'm sure you two will remember the whole series of adverts with various creatures running off with it. You can see the ostrich there as well with a pint in its neck. And then he developed that then into the other things. Guinness is good for you and Guinness gives you strength. Once again, during the Second World War, he was creating images to do with the military. And in fact, I've just recently discovered he did a set of posters, believe it or not, for Germany. This is when Guinness were looking to develop their brand overseas. And just before the war started, between 1936 and 1938, they produced an advertising campaign that was going to be used in Germany to promote Guinness over there. And it's unbelievable that you've got Gilroy's imagery with swastikas very, very prevalent and relevant in the actual imagery. Leads to say they were never produced, but obviously these things are now there in the Guinness archive. But yeah, it took me quite back to see lovable John Gilroy's imagery with the toucans flying with the pints of Guinness, and in the back there's a swastika emblazoned Zeppelin flying along as well, and various other images. So that's something that I've only just learned about.
I don't know if I've shown you this, Nick. I've got a Gaelic Guinness one here, which is a depiction of a Gaelic football player and Irish, and it's slightly nationalistic, I would probably argue.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if I suppose it is in that Gilroy style, isn't it? It's
well, is it? He normally did sign it. Is he signed Gilroy in the bottom corner? He normally did sign it.
I think it's on the football boot mainly. Yeah.
Right.
That and he's got the bottle of Guinness in his back pocket in the Gaelic football player. Yeah, I've just been looking at. You mentioned the thing. I've been looking at eBay. Two of those toucans you been on every pub wall in the 1960s. 180 quid. For two of those ceramic toucans. So.
You've got to be very careful because, Mike, you know this, Staffordshire, Carlton Ware were the big manufacturers. And when Carlton Ware was closed down, all the moulds were either sold or acquired by the Far East. So there are many fakes out there now. Certainly the iconic Guinness toucan balancing the pint, the light that was supplied to the pubs. I've got an original, but there's 1,001 different fakes out there. If anybody's interested, the best way to look at it, because once again, things have improved nowadays, but back when they were being made, there was lead in the paint and the glaze that we're using. So if you see any Guinness merchandise that's a bit wishy-washy or not a deep, dark, true colour, that's the easiest, best way to spot that it's a fake. Because nowadays they're using a wishy-washy glaze. Maybe they aren't doing it in China, but as I say, that's one easy way to spot the real McCoy. But yeah, just be careful because there are many fakes out there, simply because of the prices that the Guinness stuff, because it is just so iconic. And as I say, there must be literally hundreds of millions of homes all around the world that have a piece of Guinness memorabilia. And I would say certainly has the hand of John Gilroy featuring in that. So yeah, I love the Guinness stuff. And as I say, John Gilroy is a guy that I would love to try and acquire a piece of his original artwork. He did a lot of other, he did portraits, he did landscapes as well. I think to acquire a piece of original artwork to do with the Guinness. He also did he worked for Coleman's Mustard as well. They had the Mustard family, which was quite an iconic advertisement campaign at that time. But that's diversifying a little bit too far away. So that's Gilroy. So those are two iconic symbols at the forefront of marketing, advertising, and branding. Fortunately, to do with alcohol and to do with drinking, to do with beer.
But
as I mentioned,
I do wonder now. Actually, I think we're going to find this as you go through this today. I think there's kind of eras here, isn't it? Because I would imagine if you spoke to somebody under probably the age of 30, their image of Guinness would be Guinness cold. I mean, you don't see this branding, do you now? And I guess at the moment, Six Nations, it's all over every paper, every TV. It's kind of Guinness Six Nations, isn't it?
I would proffer that Guinness spend more money on advertising than any other brewery in the world. And some of their TV adverts and even some of their marketing campaigns have gone down as iconic.
Yeah,
they are held up now as being, breaking the mold in terms of advertising and marketing, the visual image or whatever else. So it's still very, very important. And I know when we've been to the Guinness Brewery, Bruce, there's a massive section there on advertising and marketing. So they themselves realise and appreciate what the significance and the value of it. And that's why, once again, it's probably the world brand. You go to the far-flung places of the world and ask them to mention an international drink, and I'm sure that most will, in whatever the language they're speaking, will mention Guinness because they have managed to reach that far. So, mentioned a little bit earlier on the fact that I think that beer was promoted heavily in the 50s and 60s, 70s, and then lager came onto the scene. And I would still say that even now, if you ask people to give you a beer slogan, they would come up with some of the ones that I've chosen here. Sure, you guys can come up with some yourselves, but once again, for people who aren't watching the YouTube channel, we've got the Carlsberg, which is probably the best beer in the world. We've got Heineken, refreshes the parts of the beers cannot reach. I bet he drinks Carling Black Label. Australians wouldn't give a 4X for anything else. 1664, a good year for beer. Budweiser, the king of beers. And I never really got this one. Wouldn't you rather be Hemling?
I don't remember Hemmeling, do you?
Yeah, I remember it. I was just thinking there, though. I think, again, people under 30, probably the other Carlsberg one. And I'm looking at all those, the Carling Black Label doesn't exist anymore. 4X doesn't exist anymore. Hemling doesn't exist anymore. Maybe enhance the one.
They do, because the thing with Carling, it's actually, it was always promoted as a British beer. And it is, they actually use British. That's what anymore. Yeah, that's where it developed from. So, and local to us, a Camera brewery that we had in Malton, it was all Hans around here, wasn't it? Yeah. You have the thirst, we have the Hansa.
But again, another beer doesn't exist anymore. So whether this marketing worked or not, I'm not sure. And let's be honest, it all tasted pretty much the same, didn't it? All this stuff. Yeah. Whatever label it had, it tasted the same, didn't it?
What about Sam Smith's Eingebrau? Do you remember that was called, Bruce?
Oh, something to do with the Alps or Switzerland, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was brewed and licensed by Sam Smith. And once again, Sam Smith were quite forward-looking. They were one of the first breweries to bring lager brewing into this country of a continental style. Yeah. And the imagery was a very Tyrolean-looking guy in his little plastic box on the bar with a blue background, the mountains, and it was always known as the man in the box. Yeah. And people used to go into Sam Smith's pub and say, "Can I have a pint of the man in the box?" Yeah. And Ingebrau still is around, and I don't think the actual imagery, I can't remember, Bruce, you've been in more Sam Smith's pubs than me lately, but I think the actual Ingebrau pump clip hasn't changed that much, has it?
Well, it's no longer Ingebrau. He's now got the organic lager. It's Taddy Lager, 4X. The Ingebrau branding disappeared about 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, right, so he's got rid of it complete, has he? Right.
A lot of getting used to when the Ingebrau went to go on to what we call the Taddy Lager now. It's a little sweeter, and the Ingebrau was delicious.
Yeah. And then the other one I remember is, what was the bear? The Hoff the bear.
Hofmeister, follow the bear.
Yes.
Hofmeister, follow the bear. Now, that is actually quite a traditional, civilized German brewery, but again, I think the bit that we got in the UK was slightly different. Hofmeister the bear, a big orange, big yellow bear, wasn't it?
But it was a crap costume, wasn't it? Though it really was. It was like one of them £20, fancy dress shop costumes. They actually made a whole series of television adverts around it. Yeah. This bear walking into the bar.
And then, obviously, Budweiser had that WhatsApp, didn't they? WhatsApp. And then, you mentioned it, Bruce, the one before was the Coors Light, which has, what's his name, with a martial arts guy, doesn't he, that does the adverts?
Claude Van Damme.
Claude Van Damme in some mountain, yeah. I was trying to think, that's about the only one that sticks in my head now. Guinness for the Six Nations rugby and Coors Light. Budweiser, I guess they do run adverts. Maybe I think obviously these days with your digital TV, you just fast forward the adverts, don't you, or skip them. So, are we moving on next? Shall we move on to the next section?
No, because what I'm going to do now, I from this section onwards, the two guys don't know what I've got lined up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give them a couple of catchphrases and see if they can identify the brewery, and then we'll talk a little about the brewery. So the first one, we're going to start in Yorkshire. Could have guessed it with me. So which brewery used the catchphrases "no nonsense" and "have it"?
John Smith.
John Smith's.
Well done. Okay, now Mike, you mentioned about John Smith spent quite a bit of money not a few years back using Peter Kay, went down the humorous line, and I reckon that certainly did promote their sales of the John Smiths. We've obviously talked about John Smiths quite at length in past pods, so we don't need to discuss much about the brewery. I've got other breweries that we're going to talk about. Other than, it's the brewery still is in Tadcaster. I understand brewing even of John Smith's was taken away from there, but I think they are back brewing some at John Smith's. Not quite sure with these massive breweries now. They seem to change the brewing at the drop of a hat. But John Smith's.
Magnet Ale anymore. That was it's hard to believe that was the same brewery that John Smith's bitter came from. They also produced Magnet, which was absolutely delicious.
Yeah, that's slightly stronger one again, wasn't it, bro? It's more of a traditional beer.
Lovely, yeah.
Yeah, and I was looking. Right. I mean, John Smith. I mean, looking at some of their adverts. I mean, again, there are people like Ronnie Barker was doing adverts for them in the 70s and 80s. So they are, like you said, they spent a hell of a lot of money getting fairly top. Whoever the top comedians win. And I guess back in the noughties, Peter Kay was, top draw, wasn't he, doing their adverts? And so
it was
Ronnie Barker was doing them for them as well.
John Smith was always a big clubland beer, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was big in the working men's clubs. Certainly, we didn't used to see it around here as much as we did the Tetleys, but whether that because we had a brewery depot with Tetleys. But I mean, John Smith certainly was massive in the clubs around here. So once again, whether that was the audience that they were going for. So if you want to click on that slide there, Mike, that will just give us a little bit of John Smith.
Yeah.
So there we are. We've got
that magnet was quite a symbol, wasn't it? And it's certainly anybody's driven up to Scarborough or to York. You passed the Tadcaster Brewery, the tower, the chimney had that big glowing magnet on it, and then I think again behind that, Bruce mentioned the old Bass Triangle was in the other brewery, wasn't it, in Tadcaster? Where you got to Smith's as well, and certainly some.
Just draw your notice the top left of that beer map there, where underneath the brewery it says Yorkshire Men Brew It. Yeah. So once again, they couldn't really run that set of beer mats anymore unless they are still brewing it at the brewery there. But anyway, right, so that's our first one. So we're staying in Yorkshire for the next one, and the next one is what went down great guns? Stones. Correct.
Sheffield Brewery, orange with a cannon on it, wasn't it?
So let's click on next then. Stones.
What was the cannon link? You know what the cannon link
was? Right, so the original brewery was the Cannon Brewery. And as far as I can tell, it was named the Cannon Brewery because it was next to a foundry that produced gun barrels. And it was based not too far, actually, down in Kelham Island, where, as we discussed 3 or 4 weeks back, there's been a massive renaissance of beer and pubs and brewing down in Kelham Island. That's where the Fat Cat is based. And once upon a time, Fat Cat was really, it was on its own. But obviously, you've got the Kelham Island Tavern now, you've got Kelham Island Brewery. You've got a mini little pub crawl just in that area of Sheffield, which me and Bruce found out when we were down there. What was it, about 2.5, 3 years ago, Bruce?
Yeah. So it was the Christmas before last, wasn't it? Yeah. The last pre-lockdown Christmas.
Yeah. So William Stone started brewing in 1868. His beer was popular by the time of his death in 1894. He was one of the richest men in Sheffield. And in fact, as well as the goes down great guns, the other slogan that was well known for Stones was, wherever you may wander, there's no place like Stones. That holds the accolade of being the longest running set of TV adverts ever for a beer. And the ad campaign starring Tony Barton and Michael Angelis ran from 1983 to 1991. So it ran for, 8 years, an ad campaign featuring Stones beer. I used to basically drink Stones when I was a student down in Sheffield. That was my favourite tipple, as I say, at that time. Sadly, Tennant's Brewery had long since gone. There was Ward's still brewing. Ward's was one of those beers that it was okay if you started doing it at the beginning of the night, drank it right the way through, but you didn't go, well, you don't want to be on something else and try a pint of Ward's, because it was, once again, it was a bit like your burnt beers and your Peddy. It was very sulphurous. What else do we have? We also had Whitbread as well. The Whitbread Bridge Brewery was very, very famous. And the Trophy, I think it was at that time. But yeah, Stones was my favourite beer. It was a lighter beer, quite a strong beer. And they said it was specifically brewed for the steelworkers. Once again, this thing to quench the thirst and to replace the fluids. So it was a very, very easy drinking
But again,
beer.
it was one of those beers, wasn't it? That I think when Molson Coors bought it and it went to Tadcaster and changed slightly. I always remember it being quite malty, bready, quite sweet. It was in its first, in its Sheffield version. It
was purchased by Bass in 1968. Then the Cannon Breweries closed in 1999. Then Bass was bought by Interbrew, and they had to sell the brand because the competition's monopolies mergers guy said you've got too many brands, so they sold it. Sold it to Stones is actually still brewed by Molson Coors at the brewery in Tadcaster, and the canned product is brewed in Burton. But since the withdrawal of the markets apart from Bass, obviously it's not as well promoted now. Although saying that, the statistics that I read reckon it's still in the top 20 highest selling beer brands in the UK. Yeah. But whether that's its canned version or what, I'm not sure, really.
I can't remember seeing it for quite a while, actually.
You still find cans of it.
Canned beers now, though. I'll have to check it out in Sainsbury's tomorrow. I mean, you just never think about looking at buying a 4-pack of canned beer now, do you?
No, true.
No. Not when you've got all the craft beers on board as well.
I'm just looking on. I'm looking on Untapped now. It actually says that the actual Stones bitter now is actually brewed by True North Brewing Company, and it's saying that Stones bitter brewed to original recipe with same hops and yeast from the original Cannon Brewery. So maybe they bought out the actual of Molson Coors. They've actually bought the original one.
I think some of these independent breweries are doing that now, aren't they? Like you said, I mean, somebody's brewing Watney's Red Barrel again, aren't they?
Oh, they're South Yorkshire, they're Sheffield, yeah. True North Brew Company, microbrewery, Sheffield, South Yorkshire. So as we said with Tetley's last week, it looks like they've bought one of the original recipes from the Molson Coors. And so that might be worth looking out for that. True North Stones beer, yeah. But like you say, I think that's a very simple advertising thing, isn't it, Nick? Just that cannon and the red stones, quite
promoting what strength and power and
Arsenal Football Club, Right.
Well, that's actually my little cannon. It's actually heavy. I was quite pleased with that. I thought it was going to be like nasty plastic, but it's not. It's proper. It's not bronze or brass, but it's cast. Right. So the next slogan for you guys is "For Men of the North."
Cameron's. You said Cameron's.
Now, come on, guys. It's probably the beer or the brewer that we've talked to most about in the last
Timothy
8 weeks.
Taylor's.
Absolutely, Timothy Taylor's. So there we are.
Because there's interesting because the landlord one you'd recognise, but actually they don't see. I mean, again, they've got a bit of a mix, haven't they? They've got the landlord guy, and then they've got the bushel that you get on their logo, and then. But I would always just as you got there, Nick, that Timothy Taylor's Championship beers in that circle. That's one I would probably always remember.
Yeah. Always being very traditional. I like the green and the what you call it, buff or gold. They haven't changed much. The landlord, in fact, was only introduced in 1952. That's when they first started brewing it. And once again, the figure of the jolly landlord there with his tankard and his waistcoat on, using the red. Red has always been a good colour. But the slogan for Men of the North was adapted before Landlord was actually produced. And we know about the brewery in Keighley anyway. Originally set up in the centre of Keighley in 1958. When they actually purchased the first pub and brews. Can you guess which their first pub was? We haven't mentioned it.
Maltmakers.
No, the last time we went in there, we went in and turned straight around and came out again. It's no longer. It's no longer a Timothy Taylor. So that I found that quite surprising to think that they've got rid of it now, and yet that was their first pub.
Yeah.
So first pub was purchased a year after they opened the brewery. They then moved the brewery to the North Spring Brewery in 1863 and sunk their deep well, which is where they're still getting their source of water from, in 1894. 1994 Good Beer Guy. Now, this is interesting because that's when we really were starting to first drink Landlord, wasn't it? But in 1994, the Good Beer Guide said, long regarded as king, but is the crown slipping? Still hoppy, but the fruit notes are now engulfed in bitterness. Lemon can still be detected in the nose, but the flowers seem to have gone. Remains a fine beer. And that's something that I remember we used to say, oh, it's so flowery, isn't it? It's
yeah,
so...
yeah.
And
like
yet they were reckoning, when we were trying it in the 80s, it had been actually better than that.
Yeah, before that.
Before that.
We've talked before about scaling up, when breweries scale up, when they are brewing, a fairly, consistent beer, and then they get those big contracts for the supermarket. We mentioned that you mentioned last week, Nick, Taylor's for a while were the Doom Bar, weren't they? Landlord was the Doom Bar of the, I don't know,
anywhere around the world.
90s probably. You could, like you say, you get a pint of Landlord in Dubai, and you do wonder with that scaling up, having to make lots and lots of beer. But I think what brewers, what they often say is it's a time. You're not giving beer time to condition, because you've got to get out the brewery, because you've got to get another one through the system. So maybe that's
it's a quality control. You can't have somebody physically tasting and checking it when you're brewing it in some massive great quantities. And even down to your raw material, how the hell can you keep an eye on 15,000 tons of grain compared to when you're doing a lot smaller brew, when you can physically see the grain being ticked in? Once it's all automated, I know they will say that they have all these checks in place and it's all being monitored and it's all sensed and all stuff like that. But that's the difference between an artisan product and a mass-produced product.
And of course, that's the lager. I think the lager, technically lager is kept for a while. Lagering is where you store a beer for a time to condition it, which is why, again, often if you go to Europe, in Germany especially, lager tastes fantastic. Whereas here, we just get that very quickly mass-produced fizzy stuff that, probably spends 2 or 3 days in the brewery and is shipped out. Whereas a decent lager brewer and some of the, those craft brewers that are doing it now, you are you're laying a beer down for up to a year. I mean, some of those Thornbridge beers you mentioned, they lay them down for over a year and let them slowly mature and condition, and then you drink it. Which is interesting. Go on then, Matt, next one.
Well, that said, they still owe the accolade that they've won the champion beer of Britain 5 times.
Yeah, and I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that
we can't take that off them.
Lots of brewers would still say, people who brew would say best bitter Landlord, can't beat it.
Yeah. So next one, you can't beat them, join them.
Tetley bitter men.
Yes, Tetley.
Yeah, well done. Okay, and also a man can get attached to his Tetleys.
Yeah, join them. That was quite a good one, wasn't it? That was that bitter men thing was a TV advert, wasn't it? That was on a lot of TV adverts and things. And then the huntsman, though, is a quite a strange symbol, isn't it, for a brewery? A Yorkshire brewery, especially. I know we have fox hunts in Yorkshire, but you probably think of it more of a kind of southern, slightly posher thing than working. And
confusing. There's actually another brewery uses almost an identical logo as well. Because often when I'm looking for my brewery,
is that Huntley's? Have they used that logo as well?
No, it could be Huntsman Brewery,
right.
And very, very similar. And they're not a new brewery; they go back quite a bit. So when I'm looking for Brewerymania, then you sometimes got to be careful, because obviously I naturally migrate towards Yorkshire breweries. But there is hang on, that's not a Tetley symbol; it's the whichever brewery it is. But very simple. Very striking. Red has always been Tetley's colour. Even the big neon lights on top of the Tetley's brewery that I think they've still kept on the Tetley. But simple ad campaign, but very, very effective. Simple, sharp slogan is something that people can repeat and pass on.
I've got the Elridge Popenik, Dorchester, the Huntsman Ales. Elridge
right, they're using the Huntsman.
That's right. That's
could be. Yes. Yeah.
Very
and obviously Tetley's was what, when we weren't drinking other real ale, Tetley's really was what we were drinking in Malton, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they did move. They moved from the red to the blue as well.
If I show you that image there, it is like you say. It's it's remarkable in that the hand position is almost the same. They've even got the bloody monocle that the Tetley Huntsman. Isn't it weird how close that is? The black collar on the hunting jacket. It's amazing how interesting. I mean, maybe something to look into.
I don't think there is a connection there.
No, I think you're probably right.
Or like Sam Smith, who patented or copyright the White Rose of Yorkshire. Obviously, Tetley's didn't copyright that, or Eldridge Pope didn't copyright the Huntsman logo. So they've both used it. But no, I seem to remember they moved towards a blue background and blue ashtrays and blue for some reason. That was late 1990s possibly. But that's how I always see Tetley. Yeah, Tetley Bitterman, can't beat them, you join them. Right, let's move on to the next one. We are theoretically in Yorkshire, but we're sort of heading over towards our neighbours in Lancashire. Drive out the Northern Thirst. Or brewed in the Pennines.
Webster's.
Yes.
Webster's, yeah, correct. Well done.
And there's
there we are. Freddie Truman.
Freddie Truman, yeah. Hey, have you ever seen Indoor League?
Yes, it's astonishing.
Which you still get on some obscure channel. Indoor League was the thing that Freddie Truman was the host, and it was basically pub games, and it was literally blokes with great flagons of bloody Pennine bitter playing basketballs, and Fred slowly smoking his pipe and talking about a great game. Check out on YouTube. Indoor League, fantastic. Lots of drinking.
Yeah. So drives out the Northern Thirst. I thought, is that a cricketing book? Freddie was always he was a bowler, wasn't he? He wasn't a batsman.
Bowler, yeah.
He wasn't driving a shot to the boundary.
Yeah.
But so once again, yes, sadly Webster's no more.
Do you know what? It used to be a cracking beer. Obviously, when I worked in the railway men's club, they had that on hand pump, and I probably pulled it a bit like Tetley's, so you should quite like it. But it used to be a really good beer. Now,
hang on. You're saying that. Do you want to wear the 1990 Good Beer Guide write-up of Webster's Yorkshire Bitter? Weak flavour, reminiscent of a poor quality homebrew, watery, bland, cloying, with a dirty finish on the tongue.
Nah.
And that was in the Good Beer Guide.
No, I don't get that. That's a beardy weirdies. I remember when I pulled it, it was a cracking pint in the Norton Railway Institute Club. It was a bloody cracking pint.
Well, once again, the brewery was founded at the Fountainhead Brewery in Halifax, and the spring from which the brewery drew its water was rich in magnesium sulfate, which added to the bitterness to the beer and provided it with a dry finish. The brewery was taken over by Watney Man in 1972, so we all know about Watney's. Yeah. They actually came up with the slogan, drives out the Northern Thirst. Brewery was closed in 1996. Brewing transferred to the John Smith's Brewing Tadcaster before moving to the Thomas Hardy Brewery in Burton Wood in 2004. The brand disappeared from sale around about 2015.
That's quite late, actually. That's later than I thought it was, actually.
Yeah, me too. I've never been quite awful beer. I must have like unique. I think it's been bloody awful stuff.
This wasn't pulled right, Bruce. Right.
But I never remember having ampoules in the railway club. It was
they did.
Club. It was all on electric. All right.
They only had one.
Yeah, they had that ace.
I used to get Shelley, the whatever it was, the barman used to tell me off because I used to waste so much beer, pulling it bloody nice.
No, it was Shelley was his dog.
Oh, Shelley was sorry. Mick, what was his name? So that's right, Shelley dog. Can't remember his name now. Anyway,
no, it was character.
The good old days.
Right, so the next one, bit of a newer brewery, powered by beer. Very simple, very strong logo. Powered by beer. Any ideas?
No.
They're probably the best known beer is called Mary Jane. That must give the clue.
Oh, Ilkley.
Yeah.
Ilkley Brewery, powered by beer.
Powered by beer. And once again, going to the point that it is International Women's Day or Week. Their head brewery is actually a lady called Ali, and she's an Italian from Italian descendancy. Via Scotland, I read up on her, and she's the driving force behind Ilkley Brewery. So, a relatively new brewery as in its original state now. Ilkley actually first had a brewery in 1873 that was bought out by Bass and stopped brewing in 1920. So the current Ilkley Brewery was created in 2009, and as I say, they have about 10 core beers, of which Mary Jane and Joshua Jane are two of the well-known ones. After the Ilkley More by Tat song, there's been a quarter in Mary Jane, and Joshua Jane was her husband. So that's where we get the Joshua Jane and Mary Jane from.
I think, Nick, last time we drank that was in Bar Tat in Ilkley itself. And we're having a bite of Mary Jane. And I think, actually, those beers, to me, are very Yorkshire. There, we mentioned last, when you got a really good pint of Tetley's, it reminds me, that Mary Jane reminds me a bit of Ossett. It's the same a little bit. Ossett beers remind me of those kind of days. And maybe, like you said, Taylor's in the old days, there's that slight sweetness, that smoothness, that creaminess that you get from that tight, with a sparkler quite tight. So you get that kind of cream flow, don't you, without it being bloody full of carbon dioxide or nitrogen or whatever they put in these cakes.
I mean, the image of the mill there, you could almost say it's a bit like Jerusalem, dark satanic mill, but it works so well. And I mean, I think their bottle labels are quite simple as well. But once again, an effective slogan or a logo can be something that's very simple and very easy to spot as well. If I look through the window of a pub that I've never been in before, I like to think I can spot their pump tips quite easily and say, right, it's a pub that's worth going into, because once again, I've always found their beer to be consistent. They sort of concentrate on what they do and do it well. Yeah. And you can always find a decent pint of Ilkley Brewery beer.
But again, I guess
Ilkley Brewery beer, quality.
And again, back to scale. They're brewing not huge amounts of beer. They're consistent. They're brewing enough for local trade. You don't tend to. You find the beers in sometimes supermarkets, Morrison's, people like that probably have their beers
up here.
Yeah, we get them probably down here, but not mental. Huge amounts of brewing. So I guess, as you said, Nick, quality control. You can make sure you're a decent sized brewery that's producing consistently good beer.
Alexandra's doing a good job. Yeah, she's doing a good job. Right, the next one, we are moving across the county. You'll know this one. It's a bit gorgeous. The Cream of Manchester. Boddingtons, yeah. Put Melanie Sykes on her road to fame or fortune.
Another beer that has lost its beer that's gone, hasn't it? I don't think it's brewed anymore, is it?
It is, yeah. But once again, Strange Ways Brewery, founded in 1778 by two grain merchants. Interesting this, that they reckoned in those days, of all places, Manchester Grammar School had the monopoly on grain. And so to avoid paying tax on it, they established a brewery just outside of the city limits. It was established on the eve of the Industrial Revolution. And therefore, once the Industrial Revolution hit, migration of people into the towns and cities, in the mills and the factories, massive market for beer. And it was known as a Cream of Manchester. It was an easy drinking beer. Once again, during the era of Melanie Sykes, these are the adverts that I remember the most. A full range of banners. This one, unfortunately, is cropped off a bit, but this shows an ice cream cone with a cream on the top of it. Very, very clever marketing, all the different imagery of cream and things like that. And it was, as far as I can remember, it was a soft, slightly sweet drink, very easy to drink, quite light coloured for a bitter as well. But then, the brewery's closed down, it was bought out, it moved down to Burton, and it was an absolute shadow of its former self. Really was. So what does it say? Yeah, closed the brewery in 2005. In fact, you get these pubs of community interest now, whereby if they're getting quick enough, then they can get the authority to stop the pub being closed down. There was a campaign for about 3 years in Manchester. A lot of local people campaigned to stop the brewery from being closed. And it did have a stay of execution for 3 years, but eventually, 2005, it was closed down. So that's Boddingtons, I say. Whenever we were over in Lancashire, certainly you could find the Boddingtons. And I don't know if you can see in the little bottom corner there, Bruce, that little bottle of little bodies.
Nice. Where's that?
Yeah, that was what you left in your house when I acquired it, Bruce.
Okay.
I was going to actually crack that bottle open tonight. And in fact, I might still do, actually, while you guys are thinking about the next one.
20 years.
Because it's best before 1989. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to let you think about this next one. I'm going to rush upstairs, grab that little bottle of baby bodies, and I'm going to crack it open. Let's see what it looks like.
as well, because this alcohol-free beer is going straight through me.
Right. So the next one to think about.
If that's still sealed up, it may be valuable, that, Nick,
It's all right, Bruce. You left me about 3 or 4 of them, mate.
Crikey.
Right, this one for you, Bruce. You should get this one because this place is your second home. The first slogan I didn't remember as much as the other one, but the first slogan is the other side of dark.
The other side of dark. I don't know.
Shall I give you the easier one?
Yes.
It was a song by Chesney Hawkes. I am the one and only.
I'm still no wiser.
The one and only, Bruce. Mike's back.
Which one?
Right, I'm back. Come on, move on. Let's crack on.
Right, so I've given Bruce the 2 clues. The other side of dark, which is a harder one, or the one that you should get, the one and only.
Newcastle Brown.
Oh,
Newcastle Brown Ale.
Brown Ale.
yeah. The one and only, yeah. I've never heard it called the other side of dark.
Yeah.
Before, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So launched in 1927 by a Colonel Jim Porter, who worked for Newcastle Breweries, and he spent 3 years developing it. 1960s, Newcastle Breweries merged with Scottish Brewers, and that afforded then they could promote it nationally. Up until the 1970s, when really reached its peak in the UK. By the late 1990s, the beer was most widely distributed alcoholic product in the UK, so you could find it all over. And nowadays, though, its biggest sale is in the US. And this is something that I've noticed on cruise boats. You go on a cruise boat and you go up to the bar and see if you've got any proper beer, mate. They always offer you lager, or occasionally they will have Newcastle Brown.
But it's actually brewed in it. I think they brew it in the US now. There's actually a
So Heineken moved brewing. This is the irony. You mentioned it 3 or 4 weeks back, Bruce, that they actually don't brew it in Newcastle anymore.
Tadcaster now, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, no, they moved it to Tadcaster in 2010. They've got a brewery in the Netherlands, and they also brew it in the States. They're like Guinness Brewery Company.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, they reckon they still sell 100 million bottles of it a year in this country. It was always one of those before you got a lot of different beer in bottles. I think it was the one that we used to fall back on, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
You know, if you were going anywhere, you always have.
I quite like it. It's quite sweet, quite malty.
You're quite right. We tried first bottle in years last year, and you've forgotten what a great beer it is. It's got a fantastic taste. And if you cook it with beer, it's streets ahead of anything else.
Yeah. Took the Colonel 3 years to develop it. So yeah, he put his.
I think we mentioned that. I think we mentioned that there's a couple of Newcastle breweries that are kind of brewing a very similar, traditional brown ale style. Which is interesting as well. And of course, they all call it dog, don't they? A lot of people call it dog in Newcastle.
Yeah.
A bottle of dog, which apparently is where I'm going to see a man about a dog, which our dad always used to say, Nick, do you remember when we were kids? Because obviously we spent some time in the Northeast, and where are you going, Dad? I'm going to see a man about a dog, which was the euphemism. I'm going to the pub to drink a bottle. So that's why I got.
Was it the pub? Was it the toilet?
No, I'm not seeing a man about a dog. Was going to the pub, and you went, and that's why you had a bottle of dog.
A great urban myth as well, was it? That there was actually a ward in like the Newcastle Victorian Infirmary that was just dedicated to people who drank too much Newcastle Brown Ale who were recovering from it, receiving treatment. And a lot of people really believe that. There's Newcastle Brown Ale recovery.
Be good if they had the intravenous bags rolled up with it in Brooks, straight into the veins.
Of course, the Blue Star's got the 5 points, and the 5 points were the 5 Newcastle breweries, weren't they? Because it was like a federation of breweries, and of course there is a 5 points brewery now, but actually it's in Hackney, which is interesting. So 5 points is quite a up and coming craft.
I know when I was working in a bar and they brought in the new technology of bottles that had to be kept in the fridge, changing colours. I know the Blue Star, if it was at the right temperature, turned white, and as then their bottle got warm, it turned back to blue again. So. I used to have one guy that used to come and always used to drink that. And the first thing he used to do as I pussed in the bottle in a half pint glass was turn the label around straight away and say, "Hey, this star ain't white. It's not cold enough." And so
the other thing used to be, not quite me on the Tuxedo Princess, which was the cruise boat under the time, but we used to go up there. It was always 2 bottles of dog, pint or schooner. And if you didn't know what pint or schooner. And a schooner is that glass that Nick's got on the screen there. It's basically a half pint glass. And the idea was that you kept your head on your beer, because obviously it was, again, you very rarely saw it in draft. It was nearly always in bottles. And you kept topping the head of your beer up by having a half pint glass with a pint bottle. So,
I think you've said this before, Bruce. I don't think it ever. It's one of those other myths. that it never was served on draft. It was always a bottled product.
No, but fully enough, we have seen it up there now. It's there was an article in the Evening Chronicle as well. We recently started producing in a small quantity. It was about 12 pubs around Tyneside. I didn't go because I had Ben with me, but I did see one with a blackboard outside. So they're brewing it in tiny quantities in drafts in certain pubs. So I'd quite like to try that. Interesting as well, exhibition, of course. Newcastle exhibition was the famous keg beer, the sister beer in Newcastle Brown Ale. And as keg beers went, it was far and away the nicest keg beer you could drink. Was that exhibition.
Well, I was going to bring another beer in here because, again, one thing that you maybe...
While you guys are talking, I'm off for that bodies.
All right. Because I was going to talk a little bit about the tanker beers. That, again, Clubland, obviously the North is famous for the working men's clubs. And because they shifted so much beer, it didn't come in barrels, it came in tankers. And the pub would literally have kind of a huge, great holding vessel kind of out the back. And literally you'd get a tank full of beer on a Friday to kind of feel Friday and Saturday nights. And the one I remember, let me sing you this song, Nick. I'm a Union man, Federation and football fan. Straight after the match, it's straight down the hatch. And this is what he put his headphones in now. So I'm going to sing you a song, Nick. You'll get the beer. I'm a Union man, football and federation fan. Right after the match, it's straight down the hatch. I was just talking to Bruce about obviously the big working men's clubs, especially the northeast, but throughout the kind of north, didn't have barrels of beer. They had tankers full of beer, and they actually had kind of tankered beer. And Federation was one of those beers, a bit like the exhibition that Bruce mentioned there, that came in bloody tankers, not barrels. And that's where I guess Watley's were the same. Double Diamond, they shifted so much beer on a weekend that it literally came in tankers, and I think that's thankfully kind of gone. But and therefore the capacity of those beers being pumped out, amazing.
I was talking the other day about the old miners' welfare clubs in the mining villages. They were literally like monopolies. There were no pubs in those villages, just like the miners' welfare. And they were saying that they'd be packed a Friday night, have turns on Friday night, Saturday, Sunday night, and Saturday lunchtime, and Sunday lunch was enormous. And he says there'd be queues of hordes of people waiting outside to get in at 12 o'clock because those days weren't allowed to there.
Yeah.
And the staff would have been there since 11:15, pulling about 3/4 of a pint. They must have hundreds of pints lined up on the bar. So when the doors open, people would be getting 3 or 4 at a time, and they just top them all up. And said it was an incredible sight.
And of course, some of that, though, again, we talked about the other week. Some of that was the licensing laws, which again is a throwback to the First World War, isn't it? Where and it's been like Australia had completely opposite effect. That what it meant was because the club was only open 12 till 2 on a Sunday. You went bonkers. You drank 16 pints in 2 hours rather than spacing yourself out. And I remember being in Australia, the same thing there, where they had even weirder hours in Australia where literally pubs shut at 6:30. So you had this kind of, I know my mates in Australia say their dads, you should literally straight off from work, an hour and a half in the pub, whacking them down and then stagger home. Bonkers. Right, Nick, we need to push on because I'm just conscious of time. We're getting very...
All right, guys. Well, we'll skip over the next one. The next one was, it's the clues in the question. It's get younger every day.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've not got much experience with the Youngers ales, other than once again, it was Youngers and McEwen's, owned by Newcastle Breweries, Scottish Newcastle, blah, 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 blah. Now it's one of the brands owned by Heineken. Remember the little guy there? Old Father William. He was quite iconic. Everybody remembers him. Going down to Midlands for the next one. Do you remember Put a Tiger in Your Tankard?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So this is the connection with Leicester, with the Royal Leicester Regiment. They earned the emblem of the tiger because they served in India for a lot of years. So the tiger was adopted as the symbol on their cap badge, and then Everard's Brewery adopted that for their Tiger beer. Once again, the Tiger beer has only been in existence since 1972. So, I mean, the brewery itself was established in 1849, but they only actually started brewing their Tiger Copper Ale from 1972 onwards. But once again, it's the beer I remember when we first started going on our beer trips, heading down Nottingham way, things like that. Midlands, I do remember the Tiger. And once again, I've got
obviously, you've got Leicester Tigers Rugby Club, which I imagine that's a name again, Leicester Regiment, Leicester Tigers. Now, I don't know. I've got a feeling there's something going on here because Everard's and Titanic, which is my local brewery down here, which is a great brewery. They, for a while, some of their early pubs were a joint venture between Titanic and Everard. So the pub that you've been in with me, Nick and the Graham, they had half the beer was Titanic and half the beer was Everard's. But the Everard's bit seems to have slipped away. I don't know whether again.
Well, beer news for you, which I was going to mention, but I didn't want to give this away. They are on the verge of opening a brand new brewery called Everard's Meadow, which is just off the M1. And as well as having a new brewery, state of the art, they've got 6,000 square foot beer hall and a shop. So if you go on their website is also very, very slick, looks very impressive. Whether because of COVID, they've not updated, but they are still talking about it opening spring 2021. So whether they had sort of like
a rebrand or something,
or eased up on, because I was led to believe that they'd stopped brewing, and they were concentrating just on the pub trade, and maybe that's why this connection with Titanic came in that Titanic were brewing for them. But as I say, this new brewery, this new state-of-the-art facility is looking very, very interesting, very, very exciting. So next time I come down to you, when lockdown is all over, June, July times, maybe having worth having a little trundle down there.
Yeah.
So the next one, well, what can we say? We won't say much about it. Once again, really, it was before our time, I think, chaps, wasn't it? DD, Rock with his red barrel.
No, I think I can remember Double Diamond.
Late 70s. Oh, it was still around. I still remember the plastic boxes on the bar, but in terms of us drinking it and being subjected to it and being abused by it, I think it was just after we started drinking, just before we started drinking, really.
And I think, going back, we mentioned Cameron 50 years on. I think this was one of the key beers for them, wasn't it? It was a very bland, sweet, weak beer. That again, I think one of the first things that Cameron did was try to find out the ABV of these beers, because brewers didn't even put the ABV on their on any of the labeling or anything. And I think I've said before, I read some of the early stuff about Cameron. Some of these guys were chemists and would secretly take kits in and look at some of these beers, and they were like 2%. Double Diamond was like 2%. I think technically it was supposed to be 3% or something like that. So.
Well, anyway, the slogans for those people who aren't watching on YouTube, you know where you are with a Double Diamond, and I put in brackets in a crap pub. A Double Diamond works wonders, and I'm only here for the beer. So you must have led a very sad life if the only reason why you're going to the pub was to drink Double Diamond.
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody, though, again, like we want in his red, picks up this and starts brewing Double Diamond again, and uses that nostalgia and, yeah, interesting.
I think Double Diamond's quite fondly remembered as opposed to Watley's Red Barrel, which everybody universally detested, didn't they?
Next one, we're moving down south to the Big Smoke, made of London.
Fuller's.
Yeah, Fuller's. Iconic. I mean, I love Fuller's branding. I think it's very traditional. It's very regal. Certainly their pubs where you see their beer signs, the pub signs, they've got the gold griffin over the top of it. In fact, the last time I was in Bath, I was walking down the street, not specific looking for a pub, but looked down a little side lane, down a little giddle, and I saw the silhouette. And I says to our lass, there's a Fuller's pub down there. Went down, it was a Crystal Palace, cracking pub. They'll be doing well in April because they've got a lovely back courtyard, beer garden area. But it's so iconic. The griffin, the golden griffin. And I say, certainly in London, you can see the pub signs sticking out when you're in a busy street. Once again, in the world of Brewerymania, they afford quite a price. I was looking at one of those brackets on a well-known online auction site about a month ago. It got up to 500 quid, and I stopped looking at it. I was amazed that a pub sign bracket was worth that sort of money. But yes, they have changed the logo and the branding a little bit in the last couple of years. Don't know that I like it as much there. I think that pump clip that you can see on screen there on that pint glass is the iconic London pride. Even the font, I think, it's iconic and everything about it. So yeah, Fuller's, Um,
I'm just looking again on eBay here. There's a double diamond beer pump here. It's top the Guinness. It's 255 quid for one of those old plastic, just the beer, you know, the light box thing that you put on the bar. So as you said, Nick, there's some money in some of this, isn't there?
Yeah. Right. Next one, we're gonna go into a bit of controversy now for various different reasons. I'm sure our next candidates, our next 3 or 4 ones, wouldn't get past the ASA now, the Advertising Standards Agency, but one of the best campaigns that I remember, and one of the funniest, if you want to click straight onto the next one, Mike, it was the Bottle of Britain, Shepherd Neame Spitfire. Now, Shepherd Neame, obviously one of the oldest breweries in the country, but they did this series of adverts around the theme of the Bottle of Britain. So the couple that we've got on the screen there, which I have as bar runners, they're the less controversial ones. We've got Mr. Churchill sticking his classic victory sign up, asking for 2 more pints, please. And then the one underneath is we've got a lady sat in an armchair looking at the clock. The clock says 20 past 11, and it's just got 2 words, Victoria Cross. Excellent. So obviously Victoria's Cross that he hasn't come back from the pub. Bit more controversial. They also did Goring, Gone. No fucker comes close. Downed Oliver Kent just like the Luftwaffe. And Clear Skies since 1945. Now these adverts,
Brexit as well.
These adverts did go out, but in fact it got to the point where London Underground withdrew the advertising because they said German tourists were complaining. It was all very much tongue-in-cheek, and in fact, I even think they made some beach towels. That there was one that said something like, "You can have the sunbeds because we're going to the bar," and they were actually encouraging people to buy these beach towels and take them on holidays with them for obviously the ongoing situation with fights over the sunbeds. But out of any advertising campaign that I can remember, I think that's got to be one of the most funniest and cleverest, really. And if you can get the full set of beer mats, it's quite a collector's item to get.
Again, Spitfire's again one of those beers that again probably 7, 8 years ago was everywhere, and again I think I'd be quite hard to find Spitfire. I mean, it's still there, isn't it? But I wonder.
Sainsbury's definitely, yeah.
It's, hasn't it? That pops a pound a bottle.
But I wonder whether that was maybe that's been a bit of a backlash that they've had to kind of tone down this a little bit.
Shepherd Neame brew a lot of the in-house, or were brewing a lot of the.
They do. Yeah,
weren't they?
Yeah, a lot of supermarket beers and.
The Shepherd Neame not Britain's oldest brewery, is it not?
It's one of them, yes, yeah. I said it was, but then it's like the Guinness symbol, the harp. Other breweries are laying claim to it as well. It's were they continuously brewing? Was it all on one site? Blah de blah de blah de blah. But I think they claim to be the UK's oldest brewery. But it's what do you actually deem to be? Is it continually brewing? Is it from the same site? Is it the name or whatever else? But bottled beers wise, it always used to be in my top 3. It's maybe slipped now. Now that there's a lot more independent breweries there.
$1.25 in Tesco's at the moment, Spitfire. Like you say, very cheap. Yeah. Actually, I'm looking at it, quite new. It was only inception was in 1990, so quite new really, and then got really big very quickly.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Once again, we're caught in controversy. Once again, the ASA probably wouldn't allow these next 2, making claims that stuff is good for you. So we've got Mackison.
It was
taste the goodness, and it looks good. It tastes good, and by golly, it does you good. I think they would have to have a whole row of medical professionals to support and back them up on that. You could say anything that contains calories and sugar to a certain extent could do you good. But I know this is something that Guinness got into trouble with. Guinness always made claims that it was good for you and it gave you strength. In fact, it didn't, medicinally wise. It wasn't good for you. But so that was the first, and that was Mackison. Nothing much to say about Mackison really, unless other than once again it was one of those bottled beers that if you had no other option. I seem to recall a couple of times having to go on the Mackison because I didn't want the lager that was on the bar and there was no beer available. But it wasn't really a stout. It was a
milk stout.
It was a milk stout. That's right.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've got some information on that. Do you know what milk stout is?
It's made of lactose, isn't it? Which is from sugar. It's like a milk, and which actually a lot of brewers now are using lactose a lot more in brew, especially darker beers. It's often you
But
find quite lactose.
yeast can't ingest lactose.
Yeah, so that's why it's
instead
quite
of-
sweet.
Instead of eating the sugar and turn it to alcohol, it remains, and that's why,
it's
your
quite
Mackinson
sweet.
tends to be a bit sweeter. The brand is now owned by Anheuser-Busch, and you can still find it out there. You can get 4
£3.60
cans,
£3.60 in Tesco's.
366, 4 cans of 330 milliliter. Yeah, but there is a stronger version of Mackinson XXX, 4.9%, and that's very popular in the Caribbean. And in fact, it's branded as the king of the night. And it's brewed and licensed by the Carib Brewery in about 3 different breweries on some of the different Caribbean islands there. So they enjoy that. And that reminded me of a story. A lad I used to know who was a drayman for, I think he was a drayman for Cameron's. And he used to deliver to a club in Leeds. And he said he could never understand. He said their biggest demand was for bottles of Lucozade and bottles of Guinness. And he said, we used to deliver there about 2:30 in the afternoon. He said, and we always used to go to the back door, so we never used to know what was going on in the bar, he said. But he said the whole spot was in absolute uproar. And one day he said to the lass behind the bar, he said, why is Guinness and Lucozade so popular? And she said, we've got a big Afro-Caribbean following. And he said, they come and drink in the day. They don't tend to come out in the night, but they come and drink during the afternoon. And their favourite drink is a cocktail of a bottle of Guinness and a bottle of Lucozade. And they call it jungle juice.
I had a little period of drinking it. It's absolutely delicious. People don't know the little glass bottles of Lucozade, but yeah, it is absolutely delicious. Yeah.
So it's a Mackinson shandy or a Guinness shandy made out of Lucozade. And he said the whole spot was like jumping at 2:30 in the afternoon. Couldn't believe it. And he said they got through crates and crates and crates of Guinness and Lucozade. Yeah, so...
Mackinson's only actually 2.8%. It was initially 3%, and it's quite a weaky beer. And that's why probably I was drinking it, because I think the old man used to get me that when I was about 14, 15, hoping that he put me off, and he drank that at college. And there were those little bottles, weren't there? Those little, whatever they were, 250 bottles that you got like what do you call them? What do you call them? Little bottles you get in the crates. They're funny.
Well, they were mixers. They call them mixers, didn't they? But that was more your tonics, your LMAs and stuff like that.
Splits. You call them splits.
Yeah.
Splits. Yeah. Right. Guinness. We've done Guinness. Oh yeah. Guinness is good. Yeah, it's good for you.
Guinness is good for you against the strength. Not really, but anyway.
Oh, my mother always says that when she was in maternity ward for me, they got a bottle of Guinness every day on maternity ward in the 1960s.
Well, that's when the advertising was working, and in fact, there wasn't an advertising standards agency.
Full of iron, aren't they? Full of a lot of iron in Guinness.
No, it's a myth. No, it's a myth.
Oh, I don't think it is.
It's no more stronger than iron than any other alcoholic beverage. But that was a clever advertising, right?
As you know, I grew up on racing stables, and twice a week, racehorses used to get bran mash for the tea. Instead of getting mixed with corn and nuts and things, and we call it chop with mixed grass things. They used to have a big bathtub of bran mash, and this in our house we used to have cases of bottled Guinness because so the stable lads didn't nick it. And my dad would come back and get half a dozen bottles of Guinness. They'd pour it in with the bran mash, so even the house were drinking it. Such was the sort of validity of that claim that it was good for you, really. That's of the horse's joints and bones. Yeah.
So the next one, we've moved on to the gold label barley wine. It's quite an iconic drink, made by tenants of Sheffield. The unfortunate tenants were closed down many years ago. Now, the claim on the beer mat there, guys, that if anybody who isn't looking at the YouTube, the statement on the beer mat is strong as a double scotch, less than half the price. I don't know that you'd actually get away with selling a product now by claiming something like that. So basically what they're saying is don't buy yourself a double scotch, buy yourself a bottle of gold label and get pissed on it instead.
It was disgusting as well, wasn't it?
Well, if you remember, Bruce, it was the only beer. It's 7.5%. I think we used to buy it.
No, it's 10.6% originally.
Right. We could buy it in the spa when we were about 13 or 14, going to Rillington discos. You could go into the spa and buy it because you'd always say it's for your granddad, isn't it? Because no young person would be drinking because it was like treacle. It was like alcoholic treacle, wasn't it? And I remember us trying to pose being very kind of sophisticated 14-year-olds sipping our gold label. And I guess when you breathed on somebody after that, he must have smelled like the dregs of a brewery. And before
the good news is you can still get it. I don't know where you're on it, Mike, but I found 24 cans, 330 millilitres on Amazon $35.99.
Yeah.
And so that would be a hell of a party. And it has come down to 7.5% now. Yeah, it's another 10.6.
It's another style of beer that, again, is out there. It's becoming, again, I wouldn't say it's popular, but again, quite a lot of breweries are looking at brewing a strong, dark beer, a barley wine, a traditional British barley wine style.
Well, once again, going back sort of 20 years when I first started reading and getting involved in camera, they used to basically say if a beer got up to an ABV of about 6%, you couldn't really call it a beer anymore. It was a barley wine. It was a wine. And yet now, we've got beers even stronger than the 7.5% that it currently is at, 8-9% that you see on bars and in craft bars.
I mean, these
like
are, they are quite sherry-like almost. You get quite a lot of raisin, quite a lot of currant, kind of that kind of dark fruit flavour. They are quite a kind of a, don't know.
See, it's interesting. On one of the beer mats here, they describe it as a very strong special beer. Yeah. And yet on the other beer mat, they describe it as a gold label barley wine.
Yeah.
So wine beer.
That's a great picture, isn't it? I absolutely love that. Fancy putting
strong as a double Scotch, less than half the price. Right. So we're talking controversy again. We've already spoken about Russells actually tonight, and these are once again, I loved being able to acquire these two. I call them change dishes. Now, a lot of people refer to them as ashtrays, but you notice there's no little groove to take your cigarette. These were more common, in fact, because like nowadays, when table service is a lot more common in pubs, you would be served at the table, you would then give your money over, and then the barmaid or whoever was serving you would bring the change back in the little dish there. So I refer to these as change dishes rather than ashtrays. But for those that aren't watching, the top dish portrays a little lad with his back teeth in a cartoon form, and he's, well, put it bluntly, he's pissing in the river. And the logo is never drink water, always drink Russell's beer. So that's the first one. And the one below shows an old boy sat up in bed with a bottle of beer in one hand and a glass in the other one. He's got quite an attractive young lady lying in bed next to him. She's asleep. And it just simply says, Russell's beer is best. So once again, sent the little boy relieving himself in the river. I don't know whether you'd get away with that nowadays. But I like these in my collection, and say Russell's were bought by Melbourne Brewery. So we never had the opportunity to try Russell's beer, did we, guys?
No, never.
Same way that we never managed to have Charles Rose, because Charles Rose with the other brewers in Malton. That we never got a chance to try Rose's beer, but at their time they had a lot of pubs in the area, and I say they were the two big breweries in town. And the final one, Mike, even more controversial. Apologies to any of the ladies out there, complete and utterly sexist. We have talked about International Ladies' Day, but these were produced by a manufacturer called Goldwell. Goldwell were making Snowball. Snowball is the bottled cocktail of Advocaat and lemonade. These date to about the 1970s. So
Snowball's Perry.
No, Advocaat.
Baby Sham's Perry. You're getting confused. Baby Sham's Perry, Michael.
Yeah.
Snowball's yellow.
Yeah. Baby Sham was with the pear cider, and Snowball was the creamy yellow one that was basically watered down Advocaat. So these mats must have been targeted at women, surely to God, because it's a women's drink. And it's showing various cocktails, but you certainly wouldn't get away with those mats nowadays. And once again, apologies if they are offensive to anybody. They are part of my beer mat collection. And as I say, certainly I've only used them now to show how things have certainly moved on. And indeed, I think Camera 2 years ago, they made the decision as well. And they said, whilst it might be jokey and whilst it might be laddie to have beers called Dizzy Blonde and Shut Your Mouth and all this sort of stuff, we're not going to accept it anymore. And certainly even I myself have realised in the last couple of years when I've been looking into the different breweries, how significant contribution ladies are making now, and how many, in fact, Great Newsom discovered this week, looking back at their website to find out their latest news. They always do a staff member of the week, and their assistant brewer is a lady. Sorry, I can't remember her name, but they're basically on the website that she does all the hard work. She develops the different beers. She does all the graft. And I think it's a fantastic thing, because like during the war, you know, brewing has always been a male-dominated area, and when women were first introduced into the armed services, a lot of the old colonels and the old higher, we don't want women on the battlefield, they don't know what they're doing. And in fact, in a short space of time, the women proved themselves, certainly dexterity and the ability to be a lot more accurate with equipment and dials and the technical side of things, and a little bit more careful, proved themselves to be as capable, not more capable than a lot of the guys. And I sometimes think that in brewing, having tried to brew my own home brew, you've got to be very careful, you've got to be very precise. And sometimes those guys will, it's all right, it's clean, it's all right, just chuck a bit more in. I certainly think ladies have got the ability to just be a little bit more careful and a little bit more methodical. As they call it multitasking, don't they? And I think that's why some now, a lot of these independent breweries are producing some very fine and consistent beers, and all to the good. So that's my branding. I'm sure that people have been listening. They may have come up with their own brands, their own thoughts, and their own slogans. And if you do have any, then please share them with us. And if I've got anything amongst my collection, then I will try and produce an image for next week. But I hope you've enjoyed that little walk down memory lane. And I think you guys did pretty well. You got most of them. Surprised you didn't get the Newcastle Brown one, but there we are.
That one. Spent most of our time in pubs the last 50 years, haven't we? So it's.
I'm going to open this baby bottle of Brown now that I reckon has got to be at least 20 years old. I'm going to open it next to my microphone to see if there's actually any life in there. So hang on. No, sounding a bit flat. Let's try it in the glass.
Will it be safe to drink?
Yeah, it's alcohol, Bruce. Safer than water, isn't it? It's
like a barley wine.
There doesn't appear to be much cream there. I don't know. Certainly not the cream of Manchester. No, it might be like the Russell, the little boy weaning into the. It's sort of clear. Yeah,
it's 31 years old.
It has got that barley wine, winey smell to it.
Conditioned.
Oh my God.
It's a cross between Winegrams and Weetabix.
Right. Well, Nick tries to drown that 31-year-old bottle of beer. That's it for this evening. Next week, we are going to take some time around the fair city of York. I think, again, Bruce is going to be in charge next week. I think, Bruce, you've got a real challenge there because, as we said a couple of weeks ago, York is a great city, first of all, but again, it's certainly a bit of a beer mecca, isn't it? And
even trying to narrow it down to 2 dozens are almost impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, Leeds was a challenge. York's probably even harder. So look forward to that one. As always, you can get us on the usual podcast providers. And I said this is probably a really good one if you want to do check us out on YouTube, because there's been quite a lot of visual. Well, it's basically Nick's cellar. We have seen Nick's cellar because we've had a tour of all his Brewerymania that he's got down there. A
little bit of it, yeah.
So we will say goodbye for this week. Again, it's been another long one, I'm afraid. So again, you might want to listen to this in 2 or 3 installments. And we're back next week with a look at York. So cheers, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Bye. See you later.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.